It's funny how life sometimes feels like a long, steady climb. Small things here and there, little joys and frustrations, and then, all at once, the ground beneath you just gives way. I never imagined my life would take such a sharp turn that night. The night of Charlotte's birthday party. I suppose if someone had told me back then, in the quiet moments before that storm, I'd have laughed. I'd have told them, "Nah, not me. I'm too grounded for that kind of chaos." But life doesn't care what you think, does it? It just happens. I've been a coach at the local rugby club in our town for close to 15 years now. It's not just a job, more like a second home, a place full of sweat, shouts, laughter, and sometimes tears. The kind of place where you grow up alongside the kids you coach, and they grow into adults right before your eyes. The club has a small bar and a hall you can rent out for parties and celebrations. And over the years, I've seen plenty of weddings, birthdays, and farewell nights held there. It's always buzzing with life, filled with families and friends who come to celebrate milestones. Charlie, or Charlotte as her friends called her, was married to one of those kids I'd coached from when he was just a teenager. His name's Tom. He was always a solid guy, quiet but dependable, had a way of listening that made you feel like you mattered, even if you just wanted to vent about life's nonsense. Over the years, Tom had become like a little brother to me. I saw him through awkward school years, first jobs, heartbreaks, and finally falling in love with Charlotte. Charlotte was vibrant, always that spark that lit up a room. She had this warmth that drew people in. But there was something else too. Something in her eyes that sometimes flickered when she thought no one was watching. I can't say I ever fully understood it. Sometimes people just carry their own secrets, I guess. When Tom and Charlotte got married, it felt like one of those rare, perfect matches. I remember the wedding day like it was yesterday. May 2018. A cool spring afternoon, just warm enough for the outdoor ceremony. Tom looked nervous, fidgety, but happy in a way that made everyone smile. Charlotte was stunning in her dress, radiant and glowing with that kind of joy you only get when you truly believe you're stepping into a new life. We all thought they had it figured out, that this was the start of something solid. A couple of years Tom kept coaching, working shifts at the warehouse, and Charlotte did her thing. She was a receptionist at a law firm downtown. Life was the usual mix of busy days and quiet nights. The usual ups and downs. I'd occasionally see them at the club laughing with friends or quietly holding hands. They looked happy, at least on the surface. So when we booked the bar for Charlotte's 25th birthday, a bit after the actual date, because scheduling everyone was a nightmare, it was supposed to be a celebration of everything that had seemed right. I was organizing things, making sure the sound system was set up, the lights were good, and the bar was stocked. Tom's brother James was helping too, and there was a buzz in the air about the party. Everyone was excited. What I didn't know, what no one knew, was that Tom had just gotten a new phone for Charlotte, a birthday gift he was proud of. That phone was about to unravel everything. Looking back, there were small signs, little moments I didn't notice or like Charlotte's phone being more guarded than usual, or Tom's occasional distant silence. But life moves fast, and you tell yourself not to read too much into things. People argue, people get tired, and sometimes you just chalk it up to stress. It's easier that way. I remember feeling proud that night, seeing the hall full of friends and family, the music playing, the chatter and laughter filling the room. There was that warm, almost electric feeling of being surrounded by people who care, until Tom took the mic. He started off normal enough, talking about Charlotte, telling stories about her birthdays through the years. He had this projector set up, showing pictures and videos from past celebrations, family gatherings, holidays, candid moments. It was sweet. Everyone was smiling or laughing softly, the kind of tender moments that make you feel connected. Charlotte was crying softly, surrounded by her friends, and I thought, man, what a lucky girl to have someone who loves her this much. But then, suddenly, the projector flickered and froze on a clip from their honeymoon, a video of them laughing on a beach. There was this sharp scratch in the audio, like an old record suddenly stopping. Everyone was silent, confused. That's when Tom started talking about the phone. When Tom started talking about the phone, the entire room went still. It was like the laughter and music had been sucked out of the air, replaced by a heavy weight that pressed down on everyone's chests. I could feel it, my own heartbeat speeding up, an uncomfortable tightness in my throat. I wasn't just a coach or a bystander here. Tom was family, almost a brother to me, and I wanted more than anything to believe what I'd seen before, that this was just a happy celebration. But there was no hiding from what came next. Tom told us he'd accidentally taken Charlotte's phone to work that morning. He'd grabbed it by mistake, probably in a rush to catch the train. When she called him asking for the password, he said he couldn't come back to get it. What struck me was how he described her reluctance to give him the password. She called it a breach of her privacy, like it was some kind of insult that he would even ask. Meanwhile, he told us he had nothing to hide, that she had his password too. That small detail felt like a crack in the foundation, the first real sign that things weren't what they seemed. But the real bombshell was what he found on that phone. Tom showed us messages, screenshots he'd blurred to protect some identities, but there was no doubt about what they said. Flirty texts that quickly crossed the line into outright betrayal, photos, videos, things that no spouse should ever have to see. The sheer coldness of some of the messages was like a slap to the face, disrespectful, cruel, and completely dismissive of the vows they'd made. And then there were the words Charlotte had sent to the other man, who as it turned out was a work colleague. The irony was brutal. The guy was right there at the party, and when the realization hit him, he didn't stick around. He slipped out quietly, like a rat escaping a sinking ship. The room was stunned. People whispered and glanced around nervously. I caught myself swallowing hard, trying to hold it together because I knew what was coming next. Charlotte's face was pale, tears streaming, but there was a coldness in her eyes, like she was calculating her next move even as everything fell apart. Tom didn't yell or cry. He didn't rant. Instead, he took a deep breath and said, "So to mark this momentous occasion, I got you this." His brother handed him an envelope, and Tom passed it to Charlotte. The words that followed were simple but devastating. "I think you can go home with whoever you want, but we're done." Then, as if dropping a hammer, he literally dropped the mic. I'll never forget that moment, the way the crowd went silent, the shuffling of feet, the shocked gasps from people who'd been drinking and laughing just minutes before. Tom walked away, shoulders squared, flanked by his brother and parents and a few close friends. No looking back, no hesitation. Left behind was the stunned mess of Charlotte and her family trying desperately to spin the story the other way, painting her as the victim, trying to turn the tables. I won't lie, it was hard to watch. The strength of denial, the power of those who refused to admit guilt, was a brutal thing. And then came the courts. That's when the real nightmare began. Charlotte used the entire spectacle as evidence against Tom, claiming he was cruel, abusive, and the bad guy in the whole mess. It was a story no one who really knew him believed for a second. We all knew the truth. Tom was kind, maybe too gentle for his own good, but the courts, the lawyers, they listened to what's convenient, what fits their scripts. She walked away with the better deal. More money, better custody arrangements. Tom, he was left with the wreckage, and the memory. That day marked the end of so many things. Our club wasn't the same after that either. People chose sides, rumors spread like wildfire, and the tight-knit community I'd been proud of, fractured under the weight of betrayal and heartbreak. As for me, I felt helpless, angry and deeply sad. Watching someone I cared about get blindsided like that, seeing the person who'd broken his heart walk away scot-free, it felt like justice was a joke. I kept replaying the images in my mind, the projector flickering, the shocked faces, the silence that swallowed the room. That record scratch on the honeymoon video, it became a symbol of how quickly life can change, how a single moment can unravel everything you thought you knew. I didn't know it then, but that night would shape everything that came after. The pain, the fallout, the slow crawl toward some kind of healing or reckoning. After that night, the world didn't stop turning, but for Tom and me, and I imagine for many others caught in situations like this, it felt like the ground beneath us had shifted so violently that we were all just struggling not to fall. The days after Charlotte's birthday party were surreal, like walking through a fog of disbelief and quiet rage. Tom barely spoke. I remember visiting him a few times in those first weeks. He'd sit on the couch in his small flat, the same one he'd moved into when they'd got married, and stare out the window, lost in a haze I couldn't break. His eyes had that hollow look, like a man who'd been punched in the gut so hard he couldn't catch his breath. It wasn't just the betrayal, It was the humiliation, the public exposure of something so deeply personal. The fact that the people who had once celebrated with them, now whispered behind their backs, or outright avoided them. The stares, the knowing glances from acquaintances who never dared to say what they really thought. And then there was the court case. I won't pretend to understand every twist and turn of family law, but I know enough to see how unfair it can be, especially to men like Tom. Charlotte's lawyer painted her as the victim, torn, scared, trapped in a relationship where she had no power. Tom, in contrast, was cast as cold, cruel, and even abusive. It was twisted, a narrative built on half-truths and emotional manipulation. The irony stung hard. I knew Tom's kindness, his patience, his quiet support for friends and family. I'd seen how he treated Charlotte, how he loved her before all this mess. But none of that seemed to matter in the sterile rooms of the court. She came out with the better deal, more custody time, more financial support. Tom's world was shrinking fast. What hurt the most was the silence. The people who once stood by him started drifting away, unsure which side to take or simply unwilling to get involved. Friends turned into strangers. The club, our little community, became divided. Some avoided him, others whispered. It was like watching a man drown while everyone else looked away. And the emotional toll, it was brutal. Tom's sleep vanished. He stopped eating properly. The light in his eyes dimmed. His once steady hands trembled when he tried to coach. The energy that made him a great player, a good mentor, was fading fast. I tried to help however I could, texting, visiting, sometimes just sitting in silence. But there's only so much you can do when someone's heart is shattered. The guilt gnawed at me too. Maybe I should have seen the signs. Maybe I should have done something before it all blew up. But hindsight is a cruel friend. Meanwhile, Charlotte and her family doubled down. They spun a story of Tom as a villain, and shockingly, some people believed it. It's a harsh truth about how the world often works. That charisma, tears, and a convincing story can outweigh facts and loyalty. I saw it in the eyes of people I'd known for years, now uncertain, hesitant, or outright skeptical of Tom's version. There were moments I caught myself wondering if Tom would ever come back from this, if he'd ever find a way to trust again or believe in love after such a brutal betrayal and public humiliation. One night after a particularly bad day, Tom confided something that stuck with me. He said he felt invisible, not in the sense that people ignored him, but like he didn't exist in the world he used to know, like he was a ghost trapped in someone else's story. That broke me, because it was true. The man I'd watched grow up, who had dreams and hopes, and a kindness that could fill a room, was vanishing into shadows. And what made it worse was knowing that the court system, the legal battles, the endless meetings and hearings, were slowly eating him alive. There were days when I wondered if it was all worth it, if the truth mattered at all in a world that rewarded the loudest voice, the most convincing act, rather than honest. But then there were also small sparks, moments when Tom laughed at something silly on TV, or told a story about one of the kids at the club. Those were reminders that beneath the pain, beneath the heartbreak, the man I knew was still there, fighting. This whole mess showed me how fragile life can be, how quickly trust can be shattered, and how even the closest relationships can crumble under the weight of secrets and lies. And through it all, I kept thinking about that night, the record scratch on the honeymoon video, the silence that swallowed the room, the way Tom dropped the mic and walked away. That moment wasn't just a scene in a party, it was the moment everything changed. The days that followed the court's decision felt like walking through a storm that refused to end. But as dark as it was, something inside Tom started to shift. That quiet, steady resolve, the kind you only see in people who've been through hell but refuse to stay there, began to flicker. He wasn't the same man from before, that's for sure. He was quieter, harder to reach. But beneath that tough exterior, there was a fire that wouldn't die. I remember the first time I saw it. We met up at the club after practice. He didn't say much, just nodded when I asked how he was holding up. But then, out of nowhere, he started talking about how he wanted to do something. Anything to take back control, not just for the sake of the divorce or custody, but for himself. I can't keep being the victim, he said, voice low but steady. I need to fight this, not with anger, but with truth. It was the first time I saw him step out of the shadows of despair. Tom began to piece together a plan, carefully and coldly calculated, much like the way Charlotte had apparently acted all along. But this wasn't about revenge in a petty way. It was about exposing the truth, making sure the lies couldn't stand forever. He started collecting evidence, gathering everything he could find: texts, emails, records that showed her duplicity, her manipulation, even the disrespectful messages she'd sent not just to the other man, but to people in our circle. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I saw him wrestling with himself, wondering if he was becoming the very thing he despised. "Is this worth it?" he asked me once. "Am I stooping to her level by doing this?" I told him that sometimes when you've been wronged this deeply, standing still isn't an option. Fighting back doesn't mean losing yourself. It means refusing to be erased. With his brother's help, Tom created a presentation, something cold and factual, void of emotion, laying bare everything he'd uncovered. It was meticulous, powerful, almost impossible to refute. And then came the moment, when he decided to make it public. It wasn't a party this time. No projector, no music, no applause, just a private meeting with a few close friends, and people from the club who still believed in him. He showed them everything. The evidence, the lies, the betrayal. I could see the effect it had. Eyes widened in shock. Some people cried, others looked away, unable to believe the depth of deceit. The moral complexity of it all hung in the air. Was this revenge? Or was it justice? Did exposing her mean dragging her down? Or was it simply reclaiming the dignity stolen from him? I think Tom wrestled with that every day. He wasn't perfect. No one is. But I saw a man trying to be honest with himself, trying to find a way out of the darkness without losing his soul. At the same time, the emotional toll was still there. The late nights, the endless questions, the quiet moments when doubt crept in and whispered, "Is this fight worth it?" But through it all, Tom was changing, not just reacting to pain, but using it to fuel a new kind of strength. I think that's what hurt Charlotte the most, that her cold, calculated betrayal had awakened something fierce in him, something she never expected. And maybe that was the true turning point, the moment when he stopped being a victim and started being a force to be reckoned with. Time has a strange way of both healing and exposing scars. It's been a few years now since that night, Charlotte's birthday party, the mic drop, the phone, the public unmask, and though the wounds are still there, raw in places, the edges have softened enough for me to look back and understand what it all meant. Tom's life didn't magically fix itself overnight. The divorce was bitter, the legal battles exhausting. Charlotte used every tool she had to twist the narrative, to paint herself as the wronged party. The courts didn't exactly side with truth or fairness, just what was convenient. That's the cold reality many of us face. But what no one could take away was Tom's quiet dignity and the strength he found in fighting back. Not with anger but with clarity and truth. He rebuilt himself, piece by piece. Coaching became his anchor again, a place to pour his passion, to connect with the kids who looked up to him. Slowly he started smiling more. He found new routines, new friendships, and even began to trust again, cautiously, but genuinely. What stuck with me the most wasn't just the pain of betrayal or the court's failure, but the way people react when the masks come off. Some friends stood by him through everything. Others vanished like ghosts. The community fractured, but those who stayed were the ones who mattered. Charlotte, she faded into the background after a while. The shock of the exposure left its mark, but life went on for her too, albeit on a very different path. The story that night at the club became a quiet legend among us. A cautionary tale about love, trust, and the bitter taste of betrayal, but also a story about resilience, about how even when you're pushed to the edge, you can fight back without losing yourself. I learned a lot from watching Tom's journey, about how life can break you, but also about how it can build you anew, about the complexity of people and relationships, about the fragility of trust and the strength it takes to reclaim it once it's shattered. And every time I think back to that night, the record scratch on the honeymoon video, the silence that swallowed the room, the mic drop that echoed louder than any speech, I'm reminded that sometimes the most painful moments are the ones that show us who we really are, not just as victims, but as survivors.